There's more going on than meets the eye. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Often we use that phrase to talk about something missing, maybe some important details that have been overlooked. Or perhaps we talk about something sinister going on, that there's more going on there than meets the eye. Because we often look at our world at the surface level. We don't really take time to really pay attention to what is going on. This story of Jesus and his disciples from our reading today from Mark's Gospel, it offers us a glimpse beyond the surface of reality. For a moment on that high mountain, the glory of Jesus is unveiled for Peter, James and John. It is like pulling back a blackout curtain on a bright sunny day. What was once dark is now flooded with light. Sometimes that light is so bright that it dazzles us who are used to seeing only in the dark. That day might have started out as an ordinary day, but on that mountaintop experience, something transformed their vision. And those 3 disciples came down the mountain as very different people. They had seen something that could not be unseen. I wonder if you can imagine how they looked at Jesus from that point on. It must have utterly changed their vision, both of him and the world around them. What the disciples saw that day was amazing, but it really was a beginning of something even more amazing, perhaps. Yes, it really was the revelation of who Jesus truly is. It was a reminder, an experience of how he plays a role in the whole history of Israel, with Moses and Elijah there to make that point. But all of this was also pointing like a sign beyond the present into the future. Or perhaps more accurately, we could put it this way: that moment on the mountaintop was the future bursting into the present. John of Patmos would later be given a glimpse of Jesus in his glory. If you remember in the book of Revelation, which is his account, he describes his vision of one who was utterly transfigured, someone who shone with glory, who had a voice like rushing waters, whose eyes blazed like fire. John of Patmos saw what these disciples had seen already: Jesus Christ, the one who was and is to come. This moment on the mountaintop was a point where time collapsed and the glory shone for all to see. In our reading from 2 Corinthians earlier on, Paul is in the middle of a discussion which centres on this idea of glory. And in chapter 3 of 2 Corinthians, he has spoken about that story of Moses who would go and visit with God. And whenever Moses came back from one of these visits, his face would be shining with the glory, we're told. And so he would put a veil over his face. And the Apostle Paul looks back at the ancient story and he gives a new interpretation for his readers. Originally, it seems like Moses used the veil to stop the people from being afraid. But Paul reads that story and he suggests that actually Moses was afraid, that they would look at his face and they would realise that that glory was fading away. And then Paul goes on to speak about how that whole age actually is now fading away, since something new has been brought forth from the old. And it's a really complicated passage, and that bit that we read from chapter 4 today only adds to the complexity of the whole thing. In chapter 4, Paul takes this image of glory and the image of veils, and he suggests that actually it's talking about our understanding of how the world works. And I think there's so much to draw from this passage in connection to what we see going on in Mark's story of Jesus' transfiguration. That image of glory is so important and so powerful. The glory is that which invades the present from the future. Glory is the experience of what could be in this world. It is the dazzling brilliance of God, an encounter with his truth, with his utter freedom. And it was glimpsed for a moment in Moses' time, and it kept fading away. And when Peter sees Jesus there shining in his glory, he tries his best to keep that moment going. He says, "Let me build you some shelters that you can stay." They didn't want that glory to fade away, but it does fade away. Or at least, in Mark's story, it seems to fade away. Because if you read on in the New Testament, the writer to the Hebrews tells us quite clearly that Jesus doesn't just reflect glory like a mirror reflects light. He's not like Moses, who has glory kind of rub off on him for a while, only to later fade away. No, Hebrews tells us that Jesus himself is the glory of God, that he is the radiance of God's glory. And what the disciples saw on that mountaintop that day was Jesus in his full being, how he was, how he is, and how he will be. Their eyes, as they're walking down the mountain, might not see the shining of his glory, but in every moment of their life with him, Jesus was the presence of the glory of God. In his person, the future became present. With every word he spoke, with every act of power, with every loving gesture, Jesus brought that future glory into the very present experience of his people. We've been living through some exceptionally difficult times. And after such a prolonged time of lockdowns and interrupted lives, it'd be so easy for us to get a kind of tunnel vision. We could look to the future and sadly see much of the same to come. We perhaps might not even dare to hope that things will ever be different. We might now see the world as a kind of new ordinary, predictably disappointing, single-layered. I think we have to reckon with just how much we have lost during this pandemic, just how much has been taken from us. And it would be so easy for us to become disheartened and discouraged in life. It is almost like it's a glory that is fading away. The greatness of life is losing its shine. But this story of transfiguration that we've encountered again today, I think that speaks directly to us in our situation. I believe it tells us to think again, or more importantly, to look again, because there's more going on than meets the eye. This world we live in has been touched by the glory of God. Our lives have been met by Jesus, the glory of God. Into ordinary people like you and like me, God has poured his light. In this world, there is a true and a living hope. And whatever our eyes see on the surface level, if we have faith to see, this world is beginning to radiate the glory of God. And as Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4 verse 6, God put this light into our hearts so that you and me, we may also shine like Christ in this world. So I'd like you to reflect on what all this means for you. What does it mean for you to shine with the glory of Christ? And I want to give you just a few examples to help you get started in your thinking about that. This glory of Christ is displayed when we love our neighbours. It is shining in us when we forgive one another. It radiates from us when we serve the poor, when we offer words of encouragement, when we put the needs of others first, when we recognise our limitations and yet keep on doing what is ours to do. The glory shines. This glory is a taste of what is to come. A new world is being born where people live up to their responsibility to steward creation. A world is coming when war and violence and greed are all things of the past. So let me ask you again, how might you shine with the glory of Christ this week? In a post-pandemic world, our calling is to be carriers of that glory of Christ, to be people who can say there is more to this world than meets the eye. As we follow Jesus, as we journey through life with him in uncertain times, may he give us the grace we need to shine. May our words, may our actions, may our thoughts be hints of a kingdom that is coming. And may others see that light and find their own way to him. And may we find courage and hope to live these challenging days, shining the glory of Christ. Amen.